underway as we hop in for another game between Kiwin and Lenok. It is going to be the same civs, but I imagine very different openings this time. In the first game, Kiwin decided to commit very hard into his opponent's base. Thought he could maybe force a GG situation before Lenok completely tech up, but he was able to follow through. Let's see if things change this time. Does Lenok want to play that same fast castle build, or is he going to look to be the more present factor in the feudal here? And it does make sense why the Roost player would want to be the aggressor here, right? Why the Ottoman player might allow that over. You know, there's kind of a ramp-up procedure here, especially with the Ottomans where you want to play more to that mid-game as opposed to potentially being blocked out too early so that you can guarantee those Vizier counter points that really will give the edge to close out a game. What I'm also curious to see in this game is whether Kiwin is once again going to interact with the hunting cabin. Last game, he built several along the outcroppings here, right? I think he had 6 or 7 in the end. He was generating 200 plus gold passively per minute. Let's see if he goes for it in this game. Has only got 1 down so far. Relying on hunting cabins is also a peculiar choice on this map, considering how finite the bounty sources are. Right, so you've got... So these are 3 deer stacks, right? As in, like, 3 in size. Oh, man, you've got so little then. So you've got, what, 14? You've got 20? So 200 gold there. So you can get 275 bounty max. I don't think hunting cabins is the play on this map. So hopefully we'll see him a bit more active in that regard. Because last game, he spent a long time setting these up. Like, you can talk about over time it paying for itself, and I agree, right? Even when you have worse gathering rates, even when you've got a lower bounty tier, eventually hunting cabin is going to pay for it. But as the game goes on, it may pay for itself. But in the short term, you've lost something, right? And I think that's what happened last time. When Kiwin put himself on the clock, he missed out on a stronger window of attack at an early phase in the game, where maybe he would have, when he went into his opponent's base, had rams, had he not invested in all these hunting cabins. Someone pointing out second scout, not even worth it. There's a reason why you're probably going to see a lot of players go for a second scout with the Roost, and it's because if you don't go for a second scout, it's very difficult to get enough gold to get your tech up. You can see how close it is. Like, 48 is not really like a good padding, I wouldn't say, in the situation, but... Oh, man, Kiwin. He sees what the goal is on this map now. He sees the oppressive sacred site. He realizes it's not king of the hill, it's king of the pit. The true pit here, actually. So what will he do? He'll make sure that he's going to be the kingmaker here. He's not going to let anyone walk up and take the crown. You have an age to keep. Use it. There's nothing that Lenok can do to stop this. So Lenok now has to kind of switch the script. Does he go for fast castle still, or does he play a prolonged feudal? I could see a prolonged feudal working here, right? Like, you build 2 rams, you break the Kremlin, you dive into the base. Because one thing you have to consider, like, what Kiwin has just done here is that he's blocked a sacred site, which is a problem several minutes down the line. But because he placed his Kremlin here and not at the back, his wood line is now completely exposed. Every wood line he has is exposed. On top of that, I know that they buffed the Wooden Fortress influence, but folks, they did not buff it that much. So he's going to have to spend an extra 175 wood on the backside. Now, he is at least going to get access to the boar. That's once again going to slow down the extra wood process, right? Because now he has to get 100 wood hunting cabin down, while still not having additional wood production anytime soon at home. So yeah, it's a sacrifice of the eco upgrades for sure. Maybe even just dropping the Wooden Fortress here would have been better. It kind of feels like, to a certain extent, Kremlin's overkill. Because either Problem's answer is going to be 2 rams, right? I think that's what we're going to see out of Lee. Either that or just complete diversion to the backside. Because even if you just get boar here, the Roost's real play is wood-based, right? You want to go into archers, you're going to need the wood. You want to get more stacked defenses, you're going to need the wood. You even want to layer your production to get more knights, which maybe you can afford with food and gold. You're going to need more wood. More spearmen on the way from Lenok in the meantime. Probably going to be a double archery range drop immediately at the beginning of feudal. We might even see a stables opening if he feels like he can just raid this for free, which I wouldn't blame him in the situation. Especially considering most Roost players' opening is going to be into an archery range. But considering the lack of wood, I wonder if Kiwin feels like he just has to go for Rax opening instead. Some point out near the end of the last game, Kiwin was stacking up gold. True, he was stacking up gold at the end of the game. My whole point around hunting cabins, the problematic element you run into is the setup time in the initial phase made his push into his opponent's base in Feudal Age weaker. His later timing was stronger, yes, but I would argue his opportunity to end that game was not fully empowered because of the hunting cabin play. Because it can't be. When you build like 6 hunting cabins, dude, that's almost 3 ramps. So we are going to get the archery range. Straggler trees for the time being. Kiwin needs to wait till they can afford a wooden fortress, I think, before we can go back out here. But he might have to rush out now that he's going archers. He has still got, well, he's still got 300, so I think he's going to, like, maybe just go straggler tree to straggler tree without wheelbarrow, by the way, which really hurts. And then go for a wooden fortress drop. Leenock on the other side is already getting into wheelbarrow. Hasn't gone for siege engineering yet, but I think once you get up to, like, 9 or 10 archers, it's worth it. He is going to go for the outpost drop, though. Ah, you cheeky git. He's like, well, I don't care about board, but you very clearly do. Vizier points coming through. So we have got a meta in the mix at this time. Outpost is going to be a fail from Leenock. Feels like maybe kind of misread this, thought he could get more out of it. Did idle out the villagers a little bit, but remember that this is 5 villagers compared to 7 being idled, so it doesn't feel that good. But Leenock, like in for a penny, in for a pound, will commit again. And remember, each time Kiwin pulls, that is also without wheelbarrow, so there's now a risk associated, especially with archers arriving. This is where I think Kiwin should back away. Like this is, you cannot do this play now. I think the other problem Kiwin has, and he's now realizing it, is by dropping the Kremlin before the boar, he actually has no way of now gathering boar at all. So this whole play hasn't, like, he got how much out of that? Almost 1,000? But once again, you sacrifice the wooden fortress, which you still don't have on the wood line, which you want to go into archers anyway, so this is definitely hurting you. I do like that he went for a more aggro-placed resource before returning to safer ones, but it's still... I'm not convinced that running your villagers out this far, building the Kremlin with the build speed of the Rus, and then also not getting the wooden fortress influence was worth it here, compared to just building a wooden fortress and then eventually giving up this area. I would point out, by the way, these games were played back-to-back by Leenock and Kiwin. So the one we just saw was the first one. This is the follow-up one. So I have a feeling that there is an element of the previous game lurking in Kiwin's mind. And I think because of what happened around the Sacred Site in the last game, it's affecting his opening this time around. And while learning from the mistakes of the last game is good, I think that this is maybe a bit of an overinvestment into countering a problem that really doesn't exist yet. Kiwin can at least get a fast attack out timing, courtesy of that boar and the deer. Leenock, in theory, shouldn't be very far behind this, right? So Kiwin will probably have a window of about 45 seconds to a minute. The problem with that is, like, he'll get his initial relics, but that's not enough time to sneak these relics. I think the Warrior Monks take too long to produce in that situation. And also, Leenock has access to immediate 2 imams, right? So he should be able to just hoover these up. Still, also, this is a no wooden fortress play after all this time. I'm a bit perplexed by the fact that we are still... I mean, I get it. Like, he rushed the castle age, right? So he couldn't afford the 175 wood. But if his plan is now to go mass archers or mass horse archers, he's going to feel it. So I'm glad at least he's got a Rax coming instead. And this is what we talked about in the last game, right? Like, usually you want to make the Rax open, the heavily armored infantry opening, when you have tech advantage first. However, he's going to be delayed with a slow build up of the Rax. The Mehmed Imperial Army is now on the way for Leenock. We are now going to see the men-at-arms on the way. Problem is, with archers on the backside, he's probably going to have to react to the issues behind his base first. And, well, there we go. We talked about the wood lines and how they didn't have any offered protection. That remains true. lookin is about to discover that, probably with a smile on his face. Kiwiin is at least starting to hoover up his relics. He could just pick this central one. Instead, he's going to prioritize the sacred site, try to force some pressure onto Lee. But Lee's beating him to that pressure point. Archers on the backside. We had to snipe out a villager. And let's get their hands on a second. They can still stand here, by the way. Kiwiin jumped the gun, trying to defend this. lookin get a few villagers for his trouble. And Kiwiin, he's in problem town now. You see that sheep count, it's not looking as healthy anymore. The deer are also very exposed. It's another thing about what's been happening around here. This Kremlin, a lack of winter fortresses, no walls. Kiwiin has a lot of exposed economy, and he actually hasn't built things that can protect it. Not even men-at-arms will do a great job of this. It's just so slow of a unit, right? It's kind of like an extreme of more open maps we're used to seeing, right? Which feels weird to say. Like, if you're not the aggressor, you feel like you're at a disadvantage. And a big difference we're seeing in Game 2 compared to Game 1 is that lookin isn't opting to go through the base, he's going around it. Because this generation was not generous. At least for Kiwiin. lookin got a decent one, actually, right? Like, there's still kind of wrap-in points, but the gold is a bit more retracted. Kiwiin, I honestly don't know how he was ever meant to fully defend this. Probably would have had to have been a small palisade wall on each side. Or you have to go for the wooden fortress. Kiwiin does at least have that sacred site timer ticking down for him. Some people pointing out the 100 counter takes 5 minutes to pay off, and in the early game, 100 wood is much more important. Exactly the point we're trying to highlight here. Especially when you know you're not going to get a higher tier of bounty in this type of map. It's just like, you always have to think about it that way. It's the same reason why people usually, traditionally, would always rush castle as opposed to scaling feudal warfare. The ramp up to getting enough units is like, you have to build 150 extra wood here, 150 wood extra there, right? Like, it's a huge sink compared to, like, say, if I rush Castle Age and I drop 150 wood on the racks, and I think about how much more impactful 1 minute arms will be compared to, you know, 3 Raxes pushing Filet Spearmen. These type of things are always in players' minds. You just always have to calculate that. You know, whenever you choose to go for something that's maybe passive, right? Same way as that when players get Castle Age, they don't always immediately go into a mosque and go for the relics, because by doing so, they're investing a lot of resources in something that isn't immediately punishing their opponent right now. It's been a punishment. Kiwiin trying to give a little bit of a spanking out. Warrior Monks truly living up to the name. 11 damage, not bad for Sniper Villiers, but I mean, you've already taken more damage than the other side. He has at least got that Sacred Site timer ticking, but we talked about what lookin's options are here, right? He could have went for the Siege Engineering. Doesn't. Just passively gets his solution. Mangonel's on the way. This Mango, it should be just out of range. Yeah, 8 tower range compared to the 9. I don't see any scrolls coming around anytime soon, so could just slow siege through this. In fact, I think lookin is just looking to get to a point where he bodies the point. And the interesting part is, oh man, did Kiwiin... Oh, I think Kiwiin outfought himself here. He got in his own brain. So the walls went up, so he's had limited information on what lookin is doing. But his read is like, I got men-at-arms first, so he's probably like building maybe his own like heavy cavalry, but he's probably like covering the crossbow bases. So Kiwiin's trying to cover that bases as well, while knowing that he has to build into siege because he's up against the Imperial Armory, right? So like, I agree with Kiwiin's play to address the siege, but this play into crossbows is going to get completely wiped by what lookin is doing. lookin's really one-dimensional with his archer approach, but it's because it's all he needs. lookin, I think we are going to see him just drop a keep here. I was about to say, this is a cool option he has, is he can now just drop his own castle on the edge. And Kiwiin won't have a way of solving this, especially if he's gone into crossbows like lookin's suspecting. Because, you know, if he is on crossbows, which I think he actually glimpsed a few with the vision from the outpost, he doesn't actually have a way of reaching that. He doesn't have a way of torching it as it's going up. His only option is to try to commit onto the villagers and die to all these archers. We finally have a wooden fortress, but I'm wondering how much wood, extra wood was missing out on this stage. I think Kiwin is looking back at the early game and like querying whether it was worth it. It's like, I still think if he'd done a Wooden Fortress and had the Kremlin at home, like he probably feels better about what's happening here. I did like the ball play though. The ball play was a solid move just to get a faster castle age. You saw the difference it made for him. But now the question is, how do you address linoc when it feels like his comp is a step ahead? Trebs are already on the way out. So he did actually toggle across. Oh wait, no, he actually built it direct. That's an interesting choice. Because if I'm not mistaken, Trebs and Mangonels take the same time to produce. I'm not an Altman spammer, so I can't tell you exactly, but I'm pretty sure they're the same time or close to. So it's interesting that linoc, he obviously wanted the Treb out quicker, but he had his first Mangonel before he had a Trebuchet, right? So I guess it was more like a reaction where he's like, oh, I need to go faster. So to kind of address that issue, he rushes into these Trebuchets off the back of the Siege Workshop. That's going to force a lot of idle time for Kiwin. Missing a lot of villagers to address this. The keep drop, as anticipated, is now on the way from linoc. A little bit more defensive than he maybe would have liked, but it's the Trebuchet threat, right? Like if you're seen running forward, he might just pump the first shot before you even start building. Luckily for linoc, Kiwin is a mild bit distracted right now. Doesn't seem to be paying attention to the giant purple blob that he's amassing. Wait, what? What did that hit? Trebuchets, come on. It's a pretty big outpost. Can you guys not be stormtroopers for a day? I think Kiwin's just one step away from losing this game. Like, if this Sacred Site is gone, linoc is ahead. Very clearly ahead. And the problem you have now is you're seeing it from Kiwin. Like, he's now trying to get a keep up on a delay against multi-trebs. He might just instantly lose it before it completes. And then the other thing for Kiwin is you just keep seeing him skirt on the sides with these springles. He desperately needs to address the siege. But if he missteps for a second, the Sipahi will tear him a new one. There it is. Keep being built up. And linoc, yep, he immediately reacts to it. He packs up and moves forward. He's getting ready to dive, in fact. He doesn't really care too much about the Kremlin. It's the castle that could be the one that would kill him. So the dive in will commence. Mangonel hit is heavy. Second is not as good, though. Doesn't get the coup de grace he's looking for. Now commitment. Archer's just making those mango shots, dodging him like he's Neo from the Matrix. Meanwhile, Siege being sniped out. Great move there on the backside by linoc. Castle goes up, but as quick as it's up, it's going to go down. On fire, and now in ruins. Castle cannot be saved, and it's going to be a whole commitment. Kiwin throws everything, including the kitchen sink and his dear old nanny in her wheelchair, just to try and keep that timer alive. But it's already been practically decapped. It's locked in at 3 minutes. This is over. There is no way back for him now. Look at the heavy hits. 59 to 45 eco. linoc has a castle. Kiwin does not. And this Kremlin is not going to last much longer either. Oh man, that play. He's got the insufficient stone bug on the Springalds. So annoying. Oh, so these aren't even repaired Springalds. They'll just get insta-sniped out. Remember that linoc can passively produce siege. Remember that Kiwin only recently got the extra wood. He hasn't even got efficient wood lines on the backside to work with. I see this one really only going one way at this stage. Just a great fight from linoc. The way he forced that, he waited for the investment by Kiwin to see that he was that invested in protecting that sacred site, and then turned the screws on him, right? Forced him to make a fight happen that he simply did not want. And once again in the breach, once again the villagers get pulled, and this time they'll be pulled into their death. Mango gets a heavy hit. The Janissary pull on point from linoc as well. I believe that was the Vizier point investment, yeah, with the quadruple military school. And that is going to be business closed and done. Kiwin cannot even get one win on the board. linoc looking dominant with the Ottomans in mountain clearing.